Okay, yeah, welcome from me. And this is week 2 where we're following a series called Symbols of Tantric Buddhism. And we're drawing on this book, which is now, sadly for you, out of print, called Creative Symbols of Tantric Buddhism. But a lot of the material is available, whereas it is available, I can't remember where. So that is helpful. Hoping to be more helpful as the evening unfolds. Okay. So last week we looked at the Tibetan Wheel of Life, and maybe I'll just say something about the overview. So it's quite exciting, isn't it, talking about the Tantra? It's like, the Tantra, all sorts of rather thrilling associations, which I won't need to mention, and I hope you're not disappointed by this evening. So the Tantra, you find it in Hinduism and Buddhism, and the word comes from the root to weave. So you can think of it as a weaving of teachings, teachings threaded together to form a technique or a practice or something like that. And it's another word for the third great phase of Buddhism, the Vajrayana. So we had the initial phase of Buddhism, which was what the Buddha taught, and his immediate legacy, the culture that kind of came from the Buddha's teachings, known as the Hinayana. And then that, like any culture, religion, tradition, it sort of needs reviving. And then the second phase is known as the Mahayana. So what the Buddha taught was a lot of principles, and he gave a lot of advice about ways to live, and it was very, very potent, especially for the people around him. It carried on being potent, but then he had 50 years of teaching, and he was able to make the most of that. But people began to see sort of that what he taught had a kind of they were able to express it differently. So in the Mahayana, you had this kind of this kind of explosion of imagery and a sort of I keep calling it a cosmic perspective. So anything that's described in the Mahayana tradition is described in a really, really exaggerated way, or not exaggerated, but sort of using terms like infinity and eternity and there's a lot of devotion in it. So if someone's being devotional, you get these kind of mythic figures. If they're being devotional, not only will one person be being devotional, but hundreds of them will be, or hundreds of thousands, and they'll be devotional for hundreds and thousands of years or eons. So Mahayana kind of explodes the principles that the Buddha taught about how we can develop our minds to the point of enlightenment, and that a new kind of mind can be born. Mahayana takes that principle out into, it says there's no end to that. And then the Vajrayana, or the Tantra, says, it's all very well worshipping for hundreds of lifetimes, but actually we can get enlightened in this lifetime if we practice. So the Vajrayana has this kind of incisive quality of like, that vision is great and it's not untrue, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? And how are you going to practice? What is your practice? And it has this quality of very direct, very personal approach. So that I'll say a bit more about what that means, the personal approach. And so the language of the Vajrayana or the Tantra is really a language of symbols. So it's a language of visual symbols and sound symbols, and ritual as well. So symbols enacted. And that's what we're exploring over the next few weeks, is looking at some of these symbols. So if you've ever sort of explored Tibetan art, for instance, so that's one of the cultures where the Vajrayana really flourished, was in Tibet or India. But Tibetan art is sort of endless, different figures. If you look at those Tanka paintings, if you've ever been to an exhibition of Buddhist art, etc., they're all codified, like lots and lots of detail, and they'll all have kind of real import. So we're not going to be able to go into that much detail, but we're looking at some of the sort of fundamental symbols. So why does the Tantra use symbols as its language? Why not, stick to what the Buddha taught, which was he had some great metaphors, and he had some really good lists, which very, very sort of easy to remember, pass on, very, very clear. Well, the danger of that, especially when you're not around the Buddha, is you sort of look at a list, and you can either you can remember it, or if you're me, you can't remember lists. But it just stays at a sort of conceptual level. And what the Tantra is saying is that concepts are good. They're really, really good for clarity. They're not to be thrown out. It's not that it's not anti-intellectual or something. Concepts are great for clarity. And what the Buddha saw and what the enlightened mind is like is not something that can be described in concepts. And we need something that's more potent. We need something that speaks to the unconscious mind, our emotional life. We need to engage our emotional life with our project of becoming enlightened or spiritual growth. And I don't know about you, but my emotional life doesn't particularly respond to things like the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path. I need to go into it a lot more sort of thoroughly for my emotional life to get kind of fired up. So the language of symbolism is talking to that. It's that you don't need to sort of theorize about symbolism. Yeah. So maybe I'll just say a little bit more about symbolism, and then I'm going to look at this particular, what we're looking at today in particular is the three esoteric refuges. So I'll explain more about that. But just something about some of us have just been on the spring retreat, and we were looking quite a lot at symbolism and its potency. And one example that we looked at was the symbol of a lotus. So a lotus, anyone can imagine a lotus, roughly speaking. It's like it's a flower, isn't it? There you go. You can you can do it more easily than me. You can look. And we can all sort of think, oh yeah, a lotus, that's a really good symbol for growth, or unfurling, or and it's quite universal. But it also could be really personal. So symbols, they can speak to us in a universal language. But if you kind of reflected on it, lotus, or brought lotuses into your meditation practice, and it became like maybe a symbol for, I don't know, like metta, or a kind of patient, loving mode of practice, then you'd start to get kind of personal associations, which would be hard to talk about, but it would sort of come closer to your own heart. So we got symbols that speak broadly, but because if they're useful symbols, if they're potent, then they can show us more and more, and we can start to sort of, they become part of our own kind of personal symbolic life Does that make sense? Yeah. So you might have things that are quite symbolic personally to you. You know, like I think, you know, over the years I've had a few dreams about recurring things, and you know, I know for myself that certain images, animals, different images, water, etc., like they're sort of part of the general language of dreams, and they've also got sort of special personal feeling for me as well. And it's not like I know the end of that. So a symbol can kind of meaning can kind of gather round symbols if they're potent. Meaning will gather round them, or even you can think of meaning kind of coming more and more out of symbols. Yeah. So that's why we use, Buddhism relies on the language of symbols a lot. And actually what we're going to do today, you can think of chanting mantra as a sound symbol. So we're going to end today with a short ritual, just so that it isn't just me talking about symbols, but we get to, partake in. Yeah, so we're looking today at the esoteric refuges. So who knows what the three refuges are in Buddhism? Does someone just want to call out what are they? What are they? Someone? Matthew?
The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got this traditional formula: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and they're either called the three refuges or the three jewels. So on this case here that I'm wearing, they're depicted as jewels, three there. And well, in this case, we're talking about them as refuges, and the Buddha. He talked about before he was enlightened, he was looking for a haven for himself, and what he said is he could see people kind of thrashing around like fish out of water or fish in shallow water, and he said that's what being unenlightened was. That there was no place for him to rest, and what that means is that the worldly life was unreliable. That we take refuge in things that are bound to disappoint. It's like we put our heart upon things that maybe satisfy for a while. They can do that, but they're conditioned, so they change. We change. They eventually disappoint. So in Buddhism, we talk about false refuges. Which are just things that we can't completely rely on. It's not that Buddhism saying you can't enjoy things or engage with things or love things even. It's just that they can't be relied upon for complete and ultimate satisfaction. And if we ask that of other people, for example, or things, then not only are we going to be disappointed, but we're going to hurt people, or we're going to cause pain. I was just thinking, particularly in terms of wanting somebody else to be something for you. I don't know if you've ever experienced being either doing that or being on the other side of that when someone sort of had a lot of expectations that they've got an idea of what you're meant to be. Maybe you're going out with them, or I don't know, different situations where that happens, where it's like you're being something's being demanded of you, or you're demanding that of someone else, and then it's really, really painful when you can't be everything for one person. So false refuges. and we do it in big ways and small ways. Yes, I don't know why I feel compelled to sort of say the silly things I've done lately, but here it comes. I think it's like more embarrassing because I'm just off this long retreat that I was talking about, and I don't know if you get home and realise you sort of seeing, oh yeah, there's a few things with our house that could be a bit better, and we've got this rug that's falling apart and it shreds everywhere. So I was like, okay, yeah, great, I'm going to buy a new rug. And I spent ages researching, had all this retreat energy, spend ages researching the new rug. I was like, can't wait to change my life with this rug. It's like so much is loaded onto it. And it's also like very, very familiar. It's very familiar that I do this sort of thing. And, I bought the rug, like, absurdly excited. It's coming to, hey everyone, the rug's coming today. Absurdly excited, and I get it. And it's actually not suitable. It's not very good. It's not a very good rug. And now, not only that, but John Lewis, they delivered it with DHL, and they can't take it back. I've got to carry it back, and it's huge. And it's now just a big problem in our living room. And it's like I know myself well enough to see it happening, and I'm not quite there with not quite doing it. Yeah. And so we do that in, and that's a way that I can laugh about, but we do it in other ways as well. So, but what the Buddha said was that what can be relied upon is the Dharma, which was the path that he taught, that leads to enlightenment. So that can be relied upon. So sometimes Dharma is spoken of as teaching. It's also talked about as reality, reality in terms of a reality that is not seen through conditioned mind, that's not seen through a mind that's got a me in here and an everything else out there, a dualistic mode of operating. So the Buddha said that reality, when we understand it, that understanding can be relied upon. And his teachings can, if practiced right, they can be relied upon. And the Buddha can be relied upon. The Buddha as a symbol of potential for any human being. So that's what's special about a Buddha, is that not only is a Buddha enlightened, but a Buddha draws us on to also become enlightened. A Buddha doesn't stay merely an object of worship. A Buddha figure draws us on to practice. And then Sangha, so the spiritual community, that can be relied upon, and not in the way of everybody who comes to the Buddha Center is completely reliable in all ways. That's going to be disappointing. But Subhadramati, one of my teachers, says the effort to create a spiritual community, that can be relied upon. That is spiritually beneficial. Yeah, whether it works out or not, that is spiritually beneficial. So those are the three traditional refuges: the practice of Sangha, and also enlightened disciples and practitioners over the years that have become enlightened. The teachings of the Buddha and the Buddha himself. Those are the three refuges. And when at the beginning of the evening, when we saluted the shrine, that's what we were saluting, those things. So what does the Tantra say about this, and what are these esoteric refuges? Well, esoteric is like the inner, yeah. So it's kind of the Tantra doesn't reject anything actually from previous Buddhist movements, but it just builds on. So these it's got a different kind of way of talking about the refuges. So we've got with the Buddha, the Tantric tradition talks about rather than the Buddha, who is a historical figure and we don't have a personal relationship with. As far as we know, he doesn't know us, we don't know him, he's distant. So the Tantric tradition talks about the guru, yeah. So this is like very widely used word with all sorts of connotations. The guru, something like a spiritual teacher. And our teacher Sangharakshita talks about the guru as being an interpreter or a translator. So you've got these general principles of Buddhism, and the guru works out how are they applicable. Yeah. So guru is a person who you have a relationship with. They know you, a personal relationship. They know you, and they can help you say what practice you need now. Yeah. What's your next step? So this is the guru tradition is much stronger in other cultures than in ours. In India and Tibet, not just in Buddhism, but like that idea of a guru is much more familiar, and for us we need to be a bit cautious. I used to think that when I was younger, I really wanted a guru. Someone, and it's all right to want that. Someone who could just felt like I couldn't articulate myself to myself, let alone to anyone else. Like, so someone who's got this like penetrating vision, who can just see me as I am and tell me what to do. But then, like, if I really thought about it, do I actually want that? Do I actually want to do what someone else tells me to do? Well, not really. I have to admit, sometimes people have tried and I didn't like it. So I don't. It's like our culture is not set up for that kind of relationship. So we got to think about how that principle applies. So our teacher Sangharakshita, when he was a young man, he was in India, and he was looking for teachers, and he heard that it was spiritually effective to submit completely to the will of your guru, because he felt like he was practicing, he was doing all this meditation, but he still could see that his ego was like there, and it was doing what egos do. So he had a teacher, Jagdish Kashyap. So he decided to submit his will to Kashyapji, that's what he called him. But his teacher wasn't that sort of commanding in a way. He didn't like have that much to say. He was sort of generally quite gentle. Until they went to Kalimpong, a Himalayan town, and 3 weeks after arriving, so Sangharakshita had never been there before, 3 weeks after arriving, Jagdish Kashyap left Kalimpong. He just decided to go wandering, and he said to Bhante, to Sangharakshita, he said, stay here and work for the good of Buddhism. And that was it. And he'd decided he'd do everything that Kashyapji said, so he had to stay in Kalimpong and work for the good of Buddhism. But like, you just imagine that you go to a town in a country that you're not that familiar with, and someone tells you to work for the good of Buddhism after 3 weeks of being, it was quite a big undertaking. I think he didn't really know what that would entail. But amazingly, really our Buddhist movement is born out of that exact action, because in Kalimpong there were lots of teachers fleeing Tibet. Sangharakshita was able to spend time with these lamas, rinpoches. He was given initiations, he was taught Zen, Dzogchen, etc. And so that instruction from his guru meant that he had an extremely rich and rewarding spiritual time. But I think it takes a lot of maturity to have a relationship with a guru. So because you have to have that kind of relationship, to say, yes, I'll do what you tell me, and then if it doesn't go right, there's no good blaming them. Do you see what I mean? You've got to take responsibility for that relationship, and it's very, very hard to do. So why we don't really have that kind of system certainly in our movement. We do have people. I was ordained by someone who I really, really look up to, and if I want advice, I think about whether. Well, when I see her, I'm careful about whether I actually want advice or whether I want someone to collude with me. So asking for advice is a serious thing. It's like, if she said to me, no, don't do that, but you want to do this, would I actually take it? So I have to think about that before asking for that input. I mean, she's not that directive. She's much more exploratory anyway. But I think she's also, careful not to give advice because, you can imagine why. Yeah. Are there any thoughts about that sort of idea of a guru? I'll pause for breath, or questions about anything that I said. Yeah.
It's going to sound silly, but I was thinking of what's the equivalent of a guru in our culture, and the first thing that came out to me is a life coach.
Yeah. Someone who we
psychological help, but not someone that's for mental help, but actually a life coach.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I had some life coaching once. It wasn't very helpful. Same, yeah. Not to say that all life coaching is unhelpful at all. Any, no.
What came to mind for me when you're talking about this guru relationship, because I agree, I don't think there's any sort of individual I'd like to give that responsibility to. But there's a practice I once got taught in a sort of Christian meditation setting called Lectio Divina. I don't know if some people here have ever tried that, but the idea is you open to like a page of the Bible usually, and you're like trying to read over it in a kind of meditative state to absorb it, sort of the imagery and sort of like not process it conceptually.
Yeah.
And you try and let God or Jesus speak to you through this text.
Yeah.
And it's a practice that I was encouraged to apply to other texts, other sort of teachers. And the way it was taught was to bring the spirit of the author forth and imagine this author's communicating with you and try and like communicate with them rather than with yourself, like talk to the book rather than just read it and consume whatever concepts are coming in. And that sort of came up as like maybe the closest thing I've had to a guru in my life.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm just going to summarize, like reading, in this practice, reading a Bible text or something similar in a receptive way, but also as if it's a personal relationship, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. And then I think what that makes me think of is a certain kind of receptivity, and I think in all of the three refuges that I'm talking about, this quality of receptivity is really important, which is not the same as passivity, but actually I think that's what Sangharakshita was being completely receptive when he just did exactly what his teacher said. He just stayed in Kalimpong and worked for the good of Buddhism, whatever that. It's like, what does that mean? I'll try. I think, yes, I'm trying to get somewhere with it. This quality of receptivity is not an unthinking or sort of servile kind of quality, but a real trying to take something in with your heart and understand it. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on. So the second of the three jewels that the Buddha taught was the Dharma, and in the Tantric tradition, it's the Yidam. So the Yidam is that which is oath-bound, and it's a figure. Yeah, so it's a spiritual figure, you could think of it as an archetypal figure. So this figure is, you're sort of initiated into this relationship by the guru, and you're given a practice. So that these archetypal figures are they're let's say manifestations of spiritual qualities or forces. So it's like the figure of the Buddha wasn't enough to articulate the vibrancy of the enlightened mind, and all of it in meditation, all of these images came into the Buddhist tradition of male and female figures with different attributes, different colours, different positions. Some of them depicting energy, some of them depicting is a bit of a reductive word, sort of embodying energy, different qualities of wisdom, compassion, purity, and so the guru will initiate the disciple with one of these images. You know, when they're deemed ready, when they're spiritually receptive enough. And traditionally it's said that you the best way is for the guru to choose the figure for you, and also traditionally it's said if that doesn't happen, then chance is a better way to choose a figure than choosing it yourself, because when you choose it yourself, you do it for superficial reasons, sort of slightly egoic reasons or something like that. And this is a figure that there'll be a whole practice around, and you'll bring it to mind in meditation. And in our tradition, in ordination, when you get ordained, you are initiated into one of these figures. And actually, in our tradition, you do choose it in dialogue with the person who ordains you. So I did that with my preceptor, Subhadramati. And I think that the principle of that is, Sangharakshita says, actually, our reasons for choosing one of these figures, so it might be Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, or Vajrasattva, the Buddha of the Bodhisattva of purity. The reason for choosing one of these figures, if it is superficial, it doesn't actually matter, because they're so efficacious that if you deepen your meditation, then your practice in relation to them will deepen. The relationship with that figure deepens. So if you chose to meditate on Green Tara because you like her necklace, so be it. You can like her necklace, and as you practice, if you're a serious practitioner, the qualities of compassion that she manifests will become accessible to you. Yeah. Or if you choose Manjushri because he's got a sword and you like swords, you fancy yourself as a bit of a hero, it's great, so be it. That it's a way to access it, And as long as you don't stay at that level, then it doesn't matter the reasons for choosing that figure. So the Dharma, I just think it's very interesting, because the Dharma in the 3 jewels that the Buddha taught is not a figure, and in the Tantric tradition, it's given, given a body. It's a body of light, but nevertheless, it's recognisable as a human figure, roughly speaking, give or take, blue skin or radiance, etc. And I think it's just helpful to reflect how human beings respond, and the thing that we respond most to is other human beings. There's other helpful symbols, like trees are really, really potent, but we don't have a tree representing the Dharma. We have a figure. I teach drawing, and I sometimes teach life drawing, and it's like when people start to draw human beings, it becomes really, really loaded, and we can often start feeling awkward, especially when you get to the face. And I think it's really understandable, because there's so much kind of psychological meaning about drawing humans. You could draw a tree or a dog or a car, and it's fine. But when you're looking at a human being, you're looking at the image of yourself in a certain kind of way, and the main means of communicating with the world. And so people sort of draw really, really big eyes and get really stressed if it's not right, because there's this absolute relationship with figures. And the Dharma sometimes is represented by the blue sky, but it's like we sort of need something more, an image of ourselves in a way, transformed to draw from. So this relationship with the Yidam will become like many people will meditate on Manjushri or Amitabha, and many people have over hundreds and hundreds of years. But we get to develop personal relationship, that as we practice, that symbol becomes alive and gives and gives and gives. So I'm introducing a final figure. So representing the Sangha, we have one figure called the Darkani. So some of you might been aware of what a Darkani is. So a Darkani is usually, sometimes it's a Darka, but Darkani is usually female form, and she's often depicted with red, dancing figure, completely naked. She'll often have a string of skulls around her neck. She might be trampling on human figures, and she's depicted in this way. She's a depiction of absolute freedom and energy, and unconventionality. So she's not going to conform to anyone's idea of what a human being should be or should do. She's got this quality of liberation. So why is the Darkani, this red, naked, fearsome dancing lady, the esoteric Sangha refuge? Well, we can think of the Darkani as spiritually stimulating company. Spiritually stimulating company. So someone, often one thinks that when you get to know what Darkani's like, it's like slightly disruptive quality. So it's like if you want to invite trouble in your life, start doing rituals for a Darkani. So she's going to not let the status quo remain. So it's got this disruptive quality. So spiritually stimulating company. Sometimes it's Sangha actually talks about the Darkani as being a bit like a muse, this like creative force that will come out in the right conditions. So we also have this word Kalyana Mitrata, which is spiritual friendship. Yeah, beautiful, auspicious, spiritual friendship. So this is company that is going to draw out the best in us. So it's not company that just wants things to always be the same kind of friendship. We just say the same old jokes, the good old joke, those jokes that you've been making since high school or whatever. It's someone in whose company change can happen, and it's somebody who will speak to your strengths. Yeah, so spiritually stimulating company will speak to your spiritual strengths, and that might be quite uncomfortable sometimes. I've definitely sort of felt that experience myself of someone who can see what's going on for me more than I can, and who has kind of pointed it out, and I don't really want to hear it, but once I've heard it, I have to admit that they're right, and that what they pointed out is holding me back. And sometimes I think of the Darkani as more of something that can arise between two people. So in a conversation, maybe with a good friend, spiritual friend, or someone whose company is as I've described. Maybe between you, it's like this quality of Darkani arises where you both come to something that you couldn't have come to between on your own. It's like a sparking off, a sense of uplift, a discussion that starts on one level. You know how sometimes discussions can start like okay, and then like the tone degenerates. It's like the opposite. When a discussion gets really, like, discoveries are made between one. This kind of muse-like quality, a spiritual muse. So the Darkani could be that, and it requires the Darkani's not going to come if you're just like not receptive. If you're sort of blunt. What's the word? Yeah, if you're sort of blocking yourself out from the world, if you're sort of numbing yourself, she won't be there. But if you open up in a certain way, then this quality might come. So a Darkani, apparently in the Buddhist tradition, she sometimes comes along as an old woman, like an old crone or a hag. And if you engage with her in the right way, she'll become like youthful and vibrant and beautiful. And I sort of was thinking about this myself. Like, I think sometimes really, really strong practitioners are very unprepossessing. Yeah, so they don't have the need to look like a cool spiritual person. I know it's like they might be just wearing some stained trousers and a fleece and some Crocs, but actually what they're doing on their meditation cushion is like entering other worlds. So you can't. The Darkani is not concerned with this conventional glamour or particular ideas of beauty, etc. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're ever in a dilemma, what you need, or if you're ever stuck with something, if you're brave enough, is this kind of company, spiritually stimulating company that's actually going to dislodge the issues that are going to arise, that are holding you back. Yeah, so those are the three Sangha, the three esoteric refuges. It's like sort of inner ways of thinking about the three jewels, very, very personal, very, very particular to who each of us are and what each of us need. I've got time for a couple more questions before I finish up. Is there any comments or questions?
Why is it called esoteric? What's
I think it's a sort of personal nature of it. It's like inner relationship. So esoteric is inner. And each, the guru, the yidam, the darkani, will be manifesting in a particular way for us. It's that, each of us. And it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah.
When the trio is depicted together, is it always as 3 jewels, or could there be other imagery?
Well, very often with the esoteric refuges, they're depicted on a whole other set of images, or image called the refuge tree. So that might have refuge tree is kind of like a spiritual family tree, and it might have the guru, the yidam, and things, darkani, sort of on it. I probably haven't got time to describe that much more. Yeah, Nadia?
I think it's more of a reflection rather than a question, but I think I was quite piqued by this idea of you've got the guru and then you've got the yidam, which are more like you could put anyone in sort of as a guru, or you could pick any sort of bodhisattva figure as a yidam or a Buddha. But I was quite piqued by the idea of then having a dakini, which is a very specific figure. And I just don't know if you knew a bit more history around it, just because I find it really interesting, because I think having a female figure that's seen as quite active and disruptive feels quite different, I suppose, compared to maybe some other more female figures that are seen a bit more sort of not passive as such, but taking a step back. It's not seen as very energetic or active as such.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the tantric tradition sort of came out of practitioners who eschewed the monastic institutions, who they maybe trained in the monasteries, etc., and they sort of go off and become a bit like social outcasts. So then a lot of the social norms would be deliberately subverted, or at least forgotten about. So then you get things that you don't normally associate with conventional norms, particularly in that society. So like the darkani figure, she's completely naked, her genitals are completely exposed, and that's like in Indian society and Tibetan society, like you might see that in religious imagery, but it's definitely not okay. You can't just go around doing that. It's a huge taboo. And then there are other things that it's something about also then within that is that religious formalism it offers us a structure that might help us, but that is not a refuge either. Okay, so what I would like to do is we'll end with a mantra. So we're going to chant the mantra of Padmasambhava, who is like the archetypal guru. So he's a figure. He went to Tibet. He took Buddhism to Tibet. It's like he had this. He was able to see all on board. So we're going to chant. We're going to chant the Padmasambhava mantra. But what I want us to do, actually, we'll just sit in meditation very briefly. I'm just going to describe something to imagine. Then I'll ring a bell, and Maitri Kumar is going to start us in the Padmasambhava mantra. So he'll chant twice, and then each of us can join in. So just settling on your seat and letting your mind, body relax. I'm just going to ask you in turn to conjure your own feeling or idea or response to each of the esoteric refuges. So you don't have to do it in a particularly Buddhist way, or it's not a right answer. But you might have someone that comes to mind, or an idea of, or an imagining. So this guru quality, what would that be like? To be with someone who really knew you, could help you understand and transform the depths of your mind. And then maybe, what would it be like to have a relationship with a figure, a sort of cosmic figure, to meditate upon, representing everything that the Buddha taught, spiritual forces, filled with beauty, love, wisdom. Maybe you've got a relationship with a Buddha or a Buddha figure. Maybe not yet, but what would it be like? And then this quality of us darkening, a slightly wild friend. Someone who really sparks you off. Creative. Wise.
Hum Vajraguru Padma Siddhi Hum. Hum Vajraguru Padma Siddhi Hum. Hum Vajraguru Padma Siddhi Hum. Hum Vajguru Padma Siddhi Hum. Om 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 Hum Vajguru Padma Siddhi Hum.
Thanks for coming, everyone. So we'll be exploring this theme for quite a few weeks yet, so do come back for more. And if you missed last week as well, you can catch up online. Surya Gupta talking about the Tibetan wheel of life. So yeah, have a good evening, and if you could help by putting the cushions away, that'd be great.
Thank you.